Want to wish a big happy birthday to America. Yeah, I know I'm a couple days early, but listen, it's a weekend-long celebration when you will be wearing your red, white, and blue overalls or shirt to your friend's barbecue, because nothing is more integral to the nation and its birthday than the American flag, right? It has been front and center at some of the most iconic images in our nation's history. It has been raised in triumph. It's also been raised on some of our darkest days as well, even been raised all the way up on the moon. But tonight on the 10, one singer wants to make the grand old flag a brand new flag and give Old Glory a new story. And that's our starting point tonight.
I try to say goodbye and I choke. Try to walk away and I stumble. Though I try to...
Remember her? Yeah, that's Macy Gray singing her hit I Try. Yeah, that's 20 years ago. These days, she's now trying to change the flag. The flag, of course, is a symbol, and symbols can carry very different meanings in different contexts to different people. For Macy Gray, the flag, she says, does not represent the America as she sees it, one that changes, one that grows. And after seeing it being held by rioters storming the Capitol in January, Gray says the American flag seems to be the replacement for the Confederate battle flag. The Confederate flag has long been considered a symbol of slavery, racism, and white supremacy, outdated thinking, you would hope. Gray says the American flag as we know it appears tattered, dated, divisive, and incorrect. Now, her suggestion would be to make that flag reflective of the melting pot that's the United States of America. I know this looks like a kid's drawing, but this is what she's picturing. Make the stripes off-white instead of white. Have the stars reflect all the different types of skin tones you find in our country, and add D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. We'll get to the stars and all that in just a minute. And in a recent interview with ITK, Gray says she's writing a letter to a couple members of Congress she thinks will support her cause. But Gray is not the only one, not the only public figure receiving backlash for her views about the flag. You might have seen this picture. Over the weekend, Gwendolyn Berry turned her back to the flag as the national anthem was being played at the U.S. Olympic trials. Berry says her protest is to raise awareness to racial injustice. Peter Ansoff, he's the president of the North American Vexillological Association. That's just a huge word for the study of flags. Well, Peter says protesting the flag like this, nothing new in the U.S.
Using the flag as a symbol of protest has a long history, and the attempts to prevent it from being desecrated and so on also have a long history. So that's a story that has been around for a long time. I'm not at all surprised that it's going on like this right now.
Listen, changing the flag is like getting a new identity, right? Giving the world a different perception of who you are as a country. We've done it subtly with the addition of states as stars over the years. And in a country full of laws, something like changing the flag and having a completely new face, it does seem like a long shot.
The basics of the flag, 13 stripes, blue canton, and white stars, are a matter of law.
So those basics have to stay, right? No matter what. The changes can be made to the flag, those subtle changes, and it doesn't take an act of Congress or an online petition to get it done. It really just comes down to one person's decision, and that's the president.
The details, like the proportions, the arrangement of the stars, and other details, now are promulgated by a presidential executive order.
So the president gets to choose. And even though the base concept of the flag has mostly stayed the same over the years, the American flag has undergone plenty of changes in its roughly 250-year history. Check out this Washington painting. You recognize it, right? Crossing the Delaware. It's got the Stars and Stripes flag in it. You know the flag we're talking about here. It's this one. Here's another shot of it. The one with the 13 stars forming a circle. It's the so-called Betsy Ross flag, although Betsy's role is a bit murky. We all know the name, right? We learned it in grade school, but there's no actual evidence she had anything to do with the design or even making this flag. Either way, we know it was not the first flag ever to be used by the colonies. We had something different when they signed the Declaration of Independence. It was this one. This is the Grand Union flag. This is believed the first time the flag was actually raised was in Somerville, Massachusetts as well. Here's a depiction of that. There's George Washington. We're talking about January 1st, 1776 at Prospect Hill. If you look at the top left there, that's the canton, that blue part there. Kind of looks like Great Britain's flag, right? And the top left there was their flag at the time, with the blue and the cross there. That's their naval flag, was just plain red for the rest of it. But we needed our own flag at the time, because when we were going to battle with them, we needed to know the difference between our ships and their ships. Flag expert Peter Ansov says someone came up with the great idea. Let's change Great Britain's flag. Well, let's change it ever so slightly.
A warship needs to have a flag to identify what country it is from. And so we needed a flag of some sort. And the warships or the merchant ships we were converting carried the normal British merchant flag, which was a red flag with the Union crosses in the canton. Someone had the idea of taking those red ensigns that the merchant ships already had and sewing white stripes across them and making that the flag of the new Continental Navy.
Listen, no one said it was the best idea in the world. They just added white stripes to it. It wasn't until 2 years later, a year after we were independent, that we got that Betsy Ross flag you're more familiar with. In all, we are now on our 27th variation of the American flag. And before the 1900s, the longest a flag had lasted was only 23 years. Think about that. The flag we use today, well, this one's been around for 61 years. Why, you ask? Well, that's after Hawaii and Alaska became states, Hawaii being the last one, the 50th. And then there have been some pretty unique flag designs all along the way. Think about it. When you have an odd number of stars or weird number of stars, look at this one. This is the Great Star Formation flag. First seen in 1818. I kind of like this one. It briefly flew over the Capitol there. And if you've ever been to Bennington, Vermont, you may have seen this flag here, the so-called Bennington flag, another one of the earliest flag designs in America, although this was never really an official one. This one is on display at the museum there. So he changed out that British part in the top corner there, the canton. So where did these stars come from in the first place? Remember, that first flag, the one on the left there, it didn't have any stars. Peter explains.
June of 1777, Congress was faced with the problem that it looked like the British were going to attack Philadelphia, and they had to organize a defense which included ships on the Delaware River, and they needed to have common flags. And so it apparently occurred to the Congress that, or to the Naval Committee of the Congress anyway, that now that we were no longer part of the British Empire, we shouldn't have the British crosses in our canton. So instead, we substituted a blue canton with white stars. One star for each of the 13 states.
Yeah, you don't want to be fighting in a war and realize your flag looks essentially just like theirs. So 13 states back then, 50 now. But it could soon be 51 or maybe even 52 stars on the flag. Just last week, the Senate once again debated whether or not to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. A lot of GOP lawmakers have expressed opposition to that, given that any congressional representation would almost certainly be Democratic for D.C. And the people of Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, have voted more than half a dozen times on whether to become a state. They want to be able to vote for president and have representation in Congress, since they pay payroll taxes that fund Medicaid and other programs. Now, if either of those succeeds, they will be able to celebrate that victory. But you wouldn't be able to show it with an updated flag like overnight. It's not like running to Home Depot and grabbing a new one. There is a special date already set for adding any new stars to Old Glory.
Congress passed a law in 1818, which is pretty much still the current definition of the flag. And that law said that you would add a star to the flag on the 4th of July following the admission of a new state. And that's what we've always done.
How cool would that be, celebrating Independence Day by changing the flag on that day? We know politicians have used the flag as a political tool as well. You often see them in the backdrops during speeches. And how can we forget former President Trump taking it a step further than that, embracing the flag before some of his rallies, the old hug, remember the bear hug? So where does that passion, there it is, and pride come from? Just like that. We asked Robert A. Sanders. He's the chair of the National Security Department at the University of New Haven. And he says all of this kind of starts at an early age.
Think about the pledging of allegiance to the flag that I don't know if they're still doing it in schools or not, but that was done in schools when I was an elementary school kid. You started the class with the pledge of allegiance to the flag and the words to the pledge of allegiance to the flag. That was your indoctrination, training, orientation, whatever word you want to put on it, to understanding part of Americana and the flag.
And when you're like 4 years old, that's when you learn that indivisible and invisible are different words. So when you're out this weekend, you're going to see the flag on everything, right? Everything from T-shirts to beer cans to blankets, people just trying to be a little patriotic. But Robert says all this commercialization could be reducing the flag's true reverence.
The reverence of it will be reduced by its regular use. So maybe it's diminished by those type of actions. I was given a flag scarf once in my life. I couldn't wear that scarf as a flag. I draped it over a picture instead.
Yeah, so technically when it comes to the clothes, it is technically illegal, but it's never really enforced. As for the burning of the flag, a common misconception, it's the freedom of speech. That's the First Amendment. It is protected under the First Amendment rights. So I wouldn't advise doing it, but technically it's not illegal. All right, before we get to the first alert weather, we should mention that obviously it's going to be rainy for most of the weekend. So a lot of the fireworks things have moved around. You want to check our website on any potential changes when it comes to the fireworks this weekend. We're celebrating Independence Day, Pete, but we're doing it in